Alright guys, welcome to the second series in this workshop. Today what we're going to do is just continue to work with the modifier stack and work within the edit poly to make certain modifications to geometry. I'm going to start off by just talking a little bit about the edit poly modifier. Essentially, if I have some shape within my scene, some geometry, I'm going under my modifier stack and I'm putting this edit poly on top of that modifier, or on top of that geometry. So that modifier is placed on top of that geometry. Essentially, this modifier allows certain editing tools within certain sub-objects based on what I have selected. I kind of went over this a little bit in the last workshop, where you have the vertex, the edge, the border, the polygon, or the element. And the hotkeys on the keyboard to get into those are 1 for vertex, 2 for edge, 3 for border, 4 for polygon, and 5 for element. And if I maximize my viewport here and hit F4 to kind of go into the wireframe, and I want to hit G to get rid of my grid, you can kind of see how that polygon is being divided up. And basically, this edit poly modifier also includes some other capabilities that you're not necessarily going to find if you're just working with like your regular geometries, or if you have an edit mesh, or it's an editable poly. So there's certain things that you can do within the edit poly modifier that you cannot necessarily do within other modifiers. Another nice thing that you can do within the edit poly modifier is there's within this mode here, you can switch it over to animate, and that will allow you to retain information and actually go back and change things, you know, if you need to go back and do that. And you know, we'll go into that in detail here in a little bit, but that's one of the nice things about having that edit poly modifier, is it allows you to go in and then later update the values that you have entered. So we're going to start off here with this plane. And I'm actually going to delete this edit poly modifier, and I'm going to go in and just give it segments of 1 and 1, and we're going to do like 5 feet and 5 feet. I don't know why that. We'll do 6 and 6. I don't know why that didn't enter in as 5 and 5, but we'll just do something like this, and we'll drop that edit poly back on there after I kind of made those changes to my plane. And what I want to do is, from my modifier list, I'm going to find lattice and drop that on top of here. Now within the lattice modifier, I'm applying it to the whole object. I can either do just my points from the vertices, or I can do just the struts. I actually want to do both, and what I'm going to do is adjust the radius of my struts to be just a little bit bigger, so they're about the same size as my joints there, so that I've actually come in here and put on a turbo smooth. I just want these guys to be about the same, so I'll go back down to my lattice, and I'm going to turn on show end result here and just adjust this value so they're about the same. Lining up there, kind of coming across that. Alright, so now that I kind of have this here, what I want to do is just to kind of begin to expand this a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll actually go back down into my edit poly modifier, and I'm going to go into the edge layer, and I'm going to turn off show end result. Just so I can show you what I am actually selecting is just this edge, and I'm hitting F3 to toggle the shade on and off, and again F4 is the edges when you're in the shaded mode. So basically I'm selecting just this edge right here, and I'm going to hit W on my keyboard, or the move tool, by clicking the button up here. I hold shift, and I can click over and basically expand that polygon as I need to expand it. You know, and I can like bring it up, for example, make some kind of modification to it. I could also, you know, click, drag it down, click and drag it over, and again I'm holding shift each time in order to kind of make an instance of that. or it's not really an instance, it's actually part of that geometry that I'm expanding out. So you know, maybe I then grab all of these edges here, and actually I guess I would only grab this side, do one side at a time here, something like this, and something like this, and we'll just grab all of these. Now I do want to point out here, your selection in your max, if you click and drag from the left side to the right side, you see mine is solid lines. Yours might actually be showing up as a dashed line when you do that, no matter how you click and drag. If you want to change that, you can go under Customize, Preferences, and you can, here under Scene Selection in the General tab, you can change the Auto Window Crossing. I leave it on so that it's similar to AutoCAD. And I typically also change one other thing in here, if I can find it. Fix text buttons. Where is it? Let me pause the video. Alright, so the other thing I was talking about is actually under the Viewport tab, and it's here, Zoom About Mouse Point, for the orthographic and perspective. So basically wherever my mouse is, when I go to zoom in and out, as long as my mouse is over that point. So if I click OK, for example, my mouse is right there, it'll zoom into that point or into that area, you know, versus so basically I can kind of zoom in and out based on where my mouse is, if I have those options selected. And then the selection, having that auto crossing, if I drag this way, you see mine is actually solid. I'm only selecting those lines, whereas dragging this way kind of selects everything. So I just want to grab these end ones here, holding shift, clicking and dragging this over just to kind of expand this. Now you might say, well, I'm not sure exactly what this is looking like, because I'm kind of within my Edit Poly modifier here doing the modifications. I can always just click on Show and Result to kind of see what's going on. Even if I come up here to my Turbo Smooth and I say, well, I kind of want some more divisions in here, I can always add a tessellate modifier on top of that. And I think I actually have to, I'm going to delete this modifier, come back down into my Edit Poly, get out of my Edge mode, and the tessellate modifier I'm going to add on top of my Edit Poly, because if I add it on top of the Turbo Smooth, it's actually trying to do it to the geometry that has kind of already been created by the Lattice Modifier. So how you're stacking these things in your modifier stack is really important. And if I needed to, you know, if I need to, I can come back down to that poly in order to drop that tessellate into the right place. Now, you know, it kind of just is doing this by the face, and I really want to do it by each of those polygons so that it's regular, and I want to do it by the center of those polygons so that it's dividing it up and giving me, you know, kind of a nice grid work there to go off of. So if I come back down into my Edit Poly, I can, you know, come in here, turn off my Show and Results just so I'm grabbing a few of these points and actually begin to make some modifications here to that base geometry. I can come into my polygon and we can use some of the things that we learned with the graphite modeling tools, where we're actually doing, like, for example, if we do like a bevel, we can extrude it up and maybe in some, except that we could also just extrude it straight up. And maybe I just repeat that a couple of times just so I can get that, you know, kind of tower form there. And again, if I uncheck the polygon layer here, click Show and Result, I can kind of see my form taking shape, you know, how I want it to be taking shape after I apply the rest of those modifiers. Or I could always come back into the poly and just turn that off so I can see that base geometry as I'm working within my stack. So it just kind of depends on what you want to see as you're working within it. The other thing that's kind of nice that I can do, if I hit T for top and Z for zoom, I come over to my create panel. I'm going to come to sphere, and I'm just going to hit S for my snaps. And by the way, I also want to again mention, make sure your keyboard shortcuts override is off, because as I'm using all of these keyboard shortcuts, it's very important that this button is not on. I'm pretty sure Max by default has that on, so I'm going to turn this on and just kind of create a sphere from that point to that point. And this is definitely, turn my snaps off by hitting S. This is definitely a little bit too refined. It's saying 32 segments, and I can actually kind of show you what that's looking like. So I want to really drop this down to something like, oh, not 5, but let's say 6. And then we'll scale this up just a little bit more. I'll hit F for front, Z for zoom, and then just I'll hit F3 to kind of see what's going on. And I want to take this bottom line and kind of line it up with my, top member there. P for perspective, Z for zoom, and F3 to shade it. So now that I kind of have this shape up here, what I can actually do is, within this modifier, I'll come down to the edit poly. I'm going to add another edit poly on top of this, and I'm going to come down and go to attach and select that sphere. Now what that has done is basically added that to my selection here, and it's just done it to this edit poly. That's why I dropped that edit poly on there, so that I can keep it separated. So if I come down here, I can rename this as like original tower, and then I can rename this as sphere edition. So then I can see, okay, that's when I added my sphere to it. I could even drop another edit poly on here and rename this to sphere extended. And what I can do is come into my polygon layer here, and what I'm going to do is actually just kind of select this whole band here, and I'm going to do an extrude, and I want to do it by polygon and just extrude this out some arbitrary distance and click accept. So you can kind of see, if I get out of this and go back to show end result, you can kind of see that's being applied to that sphere element. And if I want to turn on and off the extension, I can always go back and forth by just kind of turning that on and off. So it's like, okay, option 1, option 2. Or I could also just turn off the sphere completely, so without my addition and with my addition. So just kind of simply working within the stack, I can kind of control my modifications that I'm doing to my base geometry very easy, very quickly, and control it and just rename these so that I can go forwards and backwards and save out 3 different things, or render out 3 different things relatively quickly, to kind of show to my professor, or give to whoever as just options. And I'm not working off of that base geometry, but just kind of adding to it. So it's not like I do something off to the side. It's all within the same modifier stack, and it all has that history retained within it. So that's just kind of a basic example of working within the stack and kind of adding these different things and naming and layering. The next thing I kind of want to do is go into the create panel, create a box, and we're going to we'll do like some, I gotta click and drag and then go up and click. So that creates my box. If I hit F4, that takes me into my line work. We'll just give this like some divisions of 8, 8, and 8. Maybe not 8 for that, like 2 for that. And I will leave that at 8. This one will go to 12. So something kind of like that. Next thing I'm going to do is actually get out of my box, come over here. I'll put an edit poly just on top of it to kind of get me into my edit poly mode. And I want to come down here and apply a mesh smooth modifier to this and switch it over to classic mode. And actually, before I do my mesh smooth, I'm going to delete this out. What I want to do is a subdivide. And just so that I have all of these surfaces now triangulated instead of as quads, then I'm going to add my mesh smooth. So if I hit M on the keyboard when I have my modifier list drop down, it takes me to the M's. I find mesh smooth. And then if I switch over to classic, I can adjust the strength of this, of where it's fastening. And so you can see I can actually get different results just based on how that is being faceted. So I'm getting this kind of honeycomb effect here on my shape just by doing the mesh smooth off of the subdivide. Now if I turn that subdivide off, you see the mesh smooth really isn't doing anything. It's just kind of chamfering in those corners. So it's really based on the algorithm of how this mesh smooth is working in the classic mode, you know, with that subdivide triangulated surface. If it's just a quad, you know, it doesn't have the same effect. And again, if I come up here, I'm actually just going to turn this off temporarily, come back down to my subdivide. If I were to do a turbo smooth to this instead of a mesh smooth, it doesn't really have the same effect, and I can't come down and control my strength of it. I can only control the number of iterations, and I also don't have the option of controlling what type of method it's using, whether it's a classic, a quad output, or the NURMS method, which I believe the Turbo Smooth is just using a NURMS based algorithm to kind of smooth it out. So this is kind of the result I want to show you here, just to kind of quickly get a pattern on here. I then want to go to vertex weld on my modifier list and add that in there, and I'm going to slowly increase the threshold, and I'm going to zoom in here so you guys can kind of see what's happening as I crank this value up. And again, I'm just kind of clicking and dragging, and as I start to drag up, you see those numbers increasing, and I can just, you know, quickly kind of do that. But I'm going to go back here a little bit so you can see basically what it's doing is it's taking these points and it's joining them together, so that's all one continuous smooth surface, and there's no kind of jagged points like popping out. So I think that looks pretty good. I usually turn this up until I see some of these points, which I'm looking for the ones that are closer together, start to actually pop, and I can see that happens right about there. So I probably want to keep this down to somewhere around like 2 feet, you know, or well, maybe even like 1.5 feet, something like that, because that looks like that's the about the good range for my threshold. The next thing that I want to do is I'm actually going to put another edit poly on top of this surface. Alright, so I actually want to put a edit poly on this, dropping that on there. I can then come into my polygon sub object, and you know, I'm just going to use the graphite model. I mean, you can do it from over here. They have all the same tools kind of built within this. You just have to scroll down and find it. You know, they have the mesh smooth, make planar. Where are you? Inset is right here. So I could click on the settings here and pull up the same dialog, or if it's just easier for you, you can work out of the graphite modeling tab here and go into inset. And I don't want to do it by the group. I want to do it by polygon. I'll hit Control A to select everything, and I'm going to just slowly drag this up until I get something that I'm kind of happy with. So maybe we'll do like 3-inch inset, something like that, and click accept. Then what I can do is, with everything still selected, I can scroll down till I have my polygon material ID, and I'm going to do set ID, make this 2, and if I do Control I, and again I warn you, make sure your keyboard shortcut is off. I I do Control I to get select inversion, and I'll set this to 1, and I'll just get out of there by clicking the polygon modifier. So all of that should be on ID 1, and if I click this and hit select, all of that should be on ID 2. So once I have my IDs set here, what I can then do is I'm actually going to hold shift and drag this over and create a reference. Then on top of this, I'm going to add a volume select. I want to select by face. I want to select by the material ID, and we'll go with 1, and then actually we'll go with 2. I want the interfaces here, and then I'm going to do a delete mesh. I'm then going to add a shell modifier, and we'll do not a foot, we'll do an inch and an inch. I don't know why it's coming up as 7/8. I want 1 inch. Enter. For some reason it's not letting me. It's like, I don't know why. I'm entering an inch, I'm hitting enter, and then it's like defaulting to 7/8 of an inch, but just kind of dragged it up to get to an inch. I don't know why it's glitching out on me. Maybe because I'm running this video capture at the same time. Something goofy's going on. So anyway, I kind of have my frame here now set up based off of this geometry here, and it's a reference based off of that geometry. And then the last thing that I can kind of do is come in here and just kind of smooth this out. So I'll add a mesh smooth, and if you want kind of the rounded effect, you can leave it on the NURMs, and maybe you just increase the strength of it so you have something kind of like that. Personally, I like to go into the classic mode. I'll turn this back down to 1 and hit F4 so you can see what's going on here. Basically, when I'm turning my strength down, that's kind of the chamfer of that corner. So you see, if I turn it up, it gives me like a triangulated kind of surface, and if I turn it down, it's really zeroing in on those surfaces there in the corners. So when I go up to an iteration of 2 and turn off this, you can see it's a fairly smooth, fairly refined kind of surface there with these ridges here when it starts to bend around and do that the turning of the corner, whereas the top is kind of perfectly flat. It has these very nice like chamfered edges, smoothed edges on it. So you can see, even though my geometry is kind of crude, just by adding that mesh smooth on top of there, playing around with the strength, a couple of the parameters, I can make it pretty nice. And again, what we did last time was we just used a reference object, and that's because it creates this break. So now if I come back to this mesh here and I want to add some more modifiers, like a twist modifier, for example, I add the twist modifier, and I can enter in the angle of twist, and when I do that, my object updates. Of course, I don't want to do it in the Z, maybe I do it in the Y. So that's my kind of object twisting around there. I could take that off of there. Maybe I don't do a twist, maybe I do a FFD 4x4x4, and then what I can do is click the little plus, click control points here. I can grab these control points and begin to modify this geometry, and it should update as I do that. Now of course I have the mesh smooth on top of this, so if I actually get out of here, I click on this and I just turn off that mesh smooth and go back to my shape over here, selecting it, going back into control points. This should update a little bit quicker now, just because it's not having to smooth out my mesh and do that other stuff. So I can kind of make my modifications to this as I need to. Maybe I go into the top view, I grab these points and make this bulge out some. I'll actually kind of move this over to the side a little bit to get out my control points, and just kind of move this completely out of the way. So now if I go here, you can see my geometry kind of is already updated, and it's all based off of that original shape that I just kind of then modified, and it automatically updates because everything below here is going to be the same, tied back to that other object. Everything above is going to be different, so I can have my volume select, delete that mesh out, have the shell, and have the mesh smooth. Now if I wanted to do the same thing and have, you know, my glass panels in there, I can hold shift, bring this over, create another reference, come here, I'll take off the mesh smooth just by coming down to shell, hold shift, select these things, right click, select copy, select this guy, right click, select paste, and what I'll do then is come into the volume select, and I'm just going to change my ID to 1. So now what that's doing is that's coming in there and deleting out those faces, and you know, really I don't even need the shell necessarily. I can just have it be just those faces. I can click on my align tool up here and click on my mesh, and I want to align the Z, the X, and the Y. And now you can see if I change the color of it here just to like a red, so you can see the contrast. And I believe it's Alt X on the keyboard. Yeah, it just gives you a little transparency there to the object. So you can kind of see that I create that reference, and I can then copy those modifiers over, do whatever I need to do. Again, I want to make sure that I'm on this guy. I'm going to turn the mesh smooth off. And even if I come back here, go into my FFD that I've kind of done, and I just want to grab these lower control points. And if I start to modify this, it should automatically update over here on this guy. So I can kind of modify that more simple base geometry, and it'll update on my final kind of result there. You know, and I could have even broken this guy off and created the reference even sooner. I could have done it before I did my mesh smooth and vertex weld, and you know, so I mean, depending on where you break it off, you could have a really simple base geometry for kind of masking conceptual kind of stuff, and you know, easily diagram out kind of the transformation into your final form, you know, iteration here. Even if I come into this guy, come into my polygon layer here, and I'm going to select basically, select everything. I'm going to turn off show end result because it's doing some weird stuff with the FFD select. So I'm going to turn off show end result. I'm going to scroll down, select everything on ID number 2. Come into my random selection tool, select within the current selection 25%, and just delete these out. So you can see that, again, if I go back up then to my FFD, this is then updated with how it should be according to that, again, that original reference geometry, and it's all done from below that gray line that's in my modifier stack. So it's all based on where that break occurs, and again, this is kind of separate set of things above it for the frame versus, you know, for the lattice work. And even if I wanted to come in here and put an edit poly on top of that and make sure this is at, you know, a hard kind of surface, so that it just looks like you know, kind of panelized surfaces versus something that's smooth. I guess you really can't tell the difference. Based on this geometry, the way I have it, but you know, usually when I do kind of my panel insets, I always make sure it's a hard shading instead of a smooth shading, just so I kind of get these flat faces. But you see, they all still line up pretty much with the frame and everything else. So that's pretty much it for that example. The next thing I want to do is I actually want to do one. We'll move this just kind of out of the way here. I want to do one where I start from a shape within Max. You could also start with a shape from like AutoCAD, some line work that you bring into 3ds Max. So what I'm going to do is draw an end gun here, And end gun is basically just kind of any kind of, I can give it, you know, 6, 8, 9, 10 sides, however. We'll keep it at 6, you know, however many sides I want, and we'll do 15 feet. If I hit W for my move tool and S for my snaps, and I can hold shift then, and you know, right now I have it set to end and mid. If I right click on my snaps here, it brings this up, and I can make sure I have under my snaps standard, endpoint, midpoint turned on, and I kind of like having everything else off. Just simplifies it, and I can hold shift, and what I can do is then click and drag from point to point, release, and right now I'm just going to make a copy of that. Again, I hold shift and I can click and drag from point to point. Now sometimes when you're doing this, if you're trying to copy from one to the other, it might do something kind of goofy for you. So you know, sometimes what I like to do is also lock this stuff, and when you hit that lock button, what it's doing is it's basically whatever you have active. So you see right now I have the Y and the X active, and also up here, if I right click just in a blank area, I have my access constraints checked, which is what this is right here. And you know, I'm snapping using my access constraints toggle, and I want that on, and you know, it's locked right now in the X and the Y. You know, for this next one I only want it locked in the X. So when I click on my screen, if I go up and down, you see it doesn't do anything. I can only go left and right when it's locked in the X. So, and I can't select anything else. So even if I come over here, I could, you know, for example, if I wanted to move it from there to there, you know, if I hit Control Z, you can see that move that just occurred. So I'll move it forward, I'll move it backwards, and it was based on snapping from this point to this point. And if I turn my lock off and I try and do that same thing, as soon as I click here and try and do that, you see it kind of deselects it, and you know, messes me up. So, and tries to select this geometry over here. So it's kind of handy if you're snapping referencing something else. I even use it sometimes if I'm just doing this, so I, you know, make sure I'm getting the snap where I need it to be. And again, I'm just going to kind of make a copy of that, and I actually kind of want to do hit my space bar again, because each time you make the copy it comes off. Hold shift, make the copy again. We'll do one more like that, and we're going to select all these and space bar again to lock it in. Now I want to make sure I'm in the X and Y, and hold shift and just snap this up to here as a copy. Now I can, whoops, undo that. See, I still have my lock on, so when I want to click and drag it didn't let me do the new selection, so I want to turn that off. And select everything. Hit S for snaps again, make sure it's on, hit space to lock that in, hold shift and just kind of drag this up as I need to, and we'll do 5 of these and get kind of a long form. And I actually kind of want to maybe make this like that a little bit, kind of like that. And what I'm actually going to do is hit E on the keyboard and turn off my snaps S, and I just want to rotate this up. Now you see it's kind of an arbitrary number. What I can do is hit the angle snaps toggle, and then it's going to lock it to every 5 degrees, so that I can just kind of quickly rotate that up 90 degrees, you know, and just basically I'll move it kind of up like that. So now that I have these shapes built, what I want to do is I want to select all of these, because right now all they are shapes. And if I actually hit Shift G on my keyboard, you see that's all the geometry that is in my scene that's getting hidden on and off by hitting Shift G. And if I hit Shift S, that's a shape or essentially lines. So by selecting all these, I can right click, do convert to editable poly. Now when I do Shift G, you see it's actually been converted over to geometry. And when I go into my shaded mode, you see it's actually shaded geometry here. And if I hit F4, I can see kind of all the line work there. So then I want to just select one of these, and I could do attach and go in and start, clicking these, or I could pull out my attached list. Again, I could also pull it up over here, attach from list, and it's basically going to be any of the n-gons. So if I just type in n-gon, because I know the name of it, right there, and I click attach, it then attaches everything, so it's just that one surface now, attached all together. And the next thing I want to do is go into my vertex layer, hit Control A to select all, and I just want to find weld here and make sure that all my vertices are welded together. So as soon as I click this button, it'll weld them, or I can go into my settings and adjust the threshold, but it's fine. It's giving me a before and after, and I just click accept. So now if I come in here and actually grab this shape and try and pull it, it will, stay attached to other geometry. Whereas if I go backwards, undo select, undo weld, and now I select that same surface and try and move it, you see it's not connected to anything. I can move it about at will, and there's no effect. So again, I want to go into my vertices, have all of them selected, and just hit weld to make sure that they are welded together and connected, so that I can do the modifications that I want to do to this shape. So now that I have that taken care of, what I want to do is I'm just going to come into my edge modifier here. I can come in, I could select these kind of one by one. I'm just going to use the random selection tool just because it'd be easier and kind of quicker here just to do that. Again, I could go in there and select specifically the ones I want, but random selection is fine for me for the purposes of this kind of little tutorial of just some of the concepts here of working within the stack. So once I have my edges selected, I'm going to add a push modifier, and I want to make sure that when I add that push modifier, I do it with the edge sub-object still highlighted, because what that's telling it to do is affect only the edges. I kind of covered that a little bit last time as well. So then if I start cranking this number up here, and you see this distortion starting to happen here, like 6 feet, you can see it's only affected those ones that are selected. So if I come back down in here and I do show end result, I can kind of see that original shape and the end result of it, and I say, maybe it's just kind of too much within it, and I say, I only want maybe 50% of the ones I have selected within the current selection. And I'm a little bit happier with that. Not as many of them. Or I could, hold Control and maybe add one more, or hold Alt down and deselect one of those, or deselect one of those. Maybe I don't want 3 in a row like that and 3 in a row like that. So just kind of something like that. And maybe I want 2 there in the middle and 2 here on the edge and 1 here on the edge. So I can kind of come in and do those modifications manually as I need to. The next thing I want to do is I actually want to get out of my well, I don't want to get out of my edge, but I do want to come up to the push modifier, and I'm going to clear out this selection by adding another edit poly on top of it, so you can see that my edge selection here, which is indicated as what's being pushed, is those edges I have selected, is now gone in this new edit poly. So it's kind of like wiping the slate clean and letting me start fresh here with my new geometry. I want to switch this to the animate mode now, because the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here to my polygon layer, and I'm going to hit Control A to select all, and I want to go to my graphite modeling tools, and I'm going to do an inset here by polygon, and we'll just do like I guess we're kind of big here, so maybe do like 8 inches, something like that. That looks about right. And hit enter for that value, and I'll hit my accept button here. Now the key to kind of having that animate function on, or making sure that animate function is on before I do that inset, it'll allow me to go back and kind of change this stuff as I need to, as I'm working. I can then come down here after my inset, change this to 2, hit Control I, make sure all of this is on 1. So again, that's on, I'll set this ID to 2, and I'll do Control I. I don't know why this is not, this should be, yeah, for some reason it's doing it. It might be because I have my animate on. So what I'm going to do is I'll put another edit poly on top of it just to kind of clear that selection out. Then also what I'll do is I'll rename this inset, I'll rename this ID, and I'll rename, oops, I'll rename, can I rename this? You know what, I don't think it's letting me rename because it's my original edit poly base geometry, which, you know, whatever, is fine. So now that I'm kind of into here, let me come down and try and change this ID to 1, do an inverse, do that to 2, so then if I go back, that's 1 and that's 2. So that looks good. Then I can come in here and get out of my polygon mode, and you know, another shortcut just to get to the same thing is if I'm not using the keyboard, is I can just grab the little plus sign here and, you know, go into the polygon mode, get out of the polygon mode. I could even, if I'm in it, just click on the item here on and off to kind of get out of it. But you know, be careful clicking here because you know, technically I'm still kind of within that polygon mode by doing that. So anyway, what I can then do is do the same volume select that we did before, and I can do select by face, material ID, select 1, then we'll do delete mesh, so I kind of have my frame, and I'm saying, okay, well, you know, maybe this isn't exactly what I wanted to do, so I can grab these two, right click, do cut to get them off of there, hold shift, drag this over, create that reference again to create the break, right click, paste that guy on there. So that's my frame, drag this over, create a reference, right click, paste that on there, and just change this to ID number 2, go back up to my delete mesh. You see it's kind of doing some weird stuff there, so I'll put edit poly on there and just make sure I'm on hard smoothing here so that I can kind of see the, you know, the pan, so it's not trying to smooth that out and do some weird stuff. And I'll align it to my mesh over here and just give it a different color so you guys can see it a little bit better. Maybe green is not the best color to kind of show you. Do like a light yellow or something. So that's basically that, and I can come in, do the same shell modifier here, having this be separate, do like 3 inches, 3 feet, 3 inches, and 3 inches, just to give it some thickness. Maybe that's not enough. Maybe we do like 6 inches, or yeah, 6 inches, something like that, just to give it a little bit of thickness. Yeah, even, I mean, like, even 6 isn't really enough. So maybe do like a foot and a foot, something like that, and give it, there we go, that looks pretty good. So, now, you know, I was kind of talking about the animate feature. If I come down, I have my ID here. If I come back down to the inset, and if I come down here and I go back and actually click on the settings tab here, or again, if I just come to this drop down and go to the settings tab here, it pulls it up and it retains that value that I had set in there. Now let's say, you know, not really happy with that value, and actually, you know what, I think I need to, looks like when I click that it's trying to inset it again. I'm going to click to get out of those polygons. I'm going to click on inset, And so you can see now it's not trying to re-inset those polygons. So now if I adjust, why is it not? Inset settings. I should be able to inset settings. I should be able to adjust the value of these afterwards. Why is this not letting me? Let me pause this and see if I can't figure out what's going on here. So actually what I figured out is I kind of messed it up with the animate by trying to change material ID within the inset. So I can show you guys a quick way to kind of fix this. So it's actually kind of good that I kind of messed it up here. Just to show you the ability of kind of quickly fixing stuff. So I'm going to delete that inset, redo my edit poly, rename it inset, turn on animate, select all of my surfaces, come down to inset and give it a value of 8 inches by polygon, and that looks good, and I can accept that. And I don't want to hit commit, and I'm going to kind of leave that alone and then drop another edit poly on top of that, and we'll call this ID, and then come into here and change my selection to 2, and then do Control Y and change that selection to, or just make sure that's 1. So then if I go back down here to inset, you can see it's telling me in my animate that it's inset polygon, which before it was not saying that. So now I can see the inset polygon here, and when I click on the settings tab, it brings up the settings that I had before, and I should be able to then adjust that value if I need to in the future. So I'm just not going to, whoops, let me undo that. Let me go back into settings, and I'm just going to go back to the value I had of 8 inches and click accept. And I'm going to go back up into the ID layer, and I believe I can get out of that without messing up. Again, I'm just looking where it says inset polygon there. And then come back up into the ID layer and get out of that too, that sub object. So now I can, again, I'm just going to quickly make the reference, do the volume select, do it by face, do it by material ID, delete the mesh, and I just want to put an edit poly here and do hard smoothing, and then create another reference. And I'm going to grab these two, copy them, paste them. I'm just going to change my ID to 2, come back up to delete mesh, come down here to shell, and a foot is fine. Then I'm going to come over here and align this guy. Alright, so now we're kind of back to where we were, and I'm just going to change the color again so we can see it. I'm going to do red. There we go. So now if I come back here, what I was trying to show you guys, if I go to the inset, again you can see inset polygon here, kind of retained within that, and like I said before, I had messed up by not adding that ID on top of it. So it's kind of critical how the order of which you do things, and sometimes you got to go back and redo it. It's a little finicky like that. But I can click on my settings and then come in, 8 inches is just not enough. My professor says, oh, those look way too flimsy, so maybe I do 1.5 feet, and I click accept, and that's then my new shape here that I have kind of selected, is 1.5 feet for those members, and they're already 1 foot wide. So that I think that looks a little bit more appropriate in terms of just how this thing looks. And then I can again grab those things and just kind of make this a little more refined. We'll do a mesh smooth on top of that, and again I like my classic mode, and just drop the strength down to like 0.2. Unless you're going for that other kind of organic kind of feeling where it's like you have just more rounded stuff, and again you might have to increase it so it's something like that. if that's what you're going for. Personally, like I said, I just kind of like the classic feeling. I can even come in here, if I, kind of come in here and see how some of my points are overlapping. Here I could come into my edit poly, come into the vertex, select all of these things, come into my chamfer setting here, and I should be able to click and drag this chamfer up a little bit so that my polygons kind of match closer to what's going on there. Click accept, and I think that looks pretty good. Then what I can do is take this, go to T for top, Z for zoom, and I'm actually going to add a symmetry modifier to both of my objects here that I have selected. So I'm going to make sure both of these objects are selected, and what I'll do is I'll add a symmetry modifier on top of it, and I can grab this drop down, select mirror, and actually pull this over, and right now it's in the X, so I want to flip it to the Y and pull this down so that I actually get this guy mirrored around. And zoom in here so I can kind of see how this is merging together. So maybe something like that. And I think I actually want to do the opposite of that. So I'm going to switch it to flip, go back into my top view. We're actually going to go this way with it. Zoom in and adjust that a little bit more. There we go. Just so it reads better here on the screen, so that the geometry is kind of facing out there. The next thing that I kind of want to show you guys is that I can then come in here and actually add a volume select to the whole thing. And what I can do is take this volume select again, go to my gizmo, maybe pull it to this backside, and hit R for scaling, and just kind of scale this down and out. W to get back to the move tool. So it's maybe something like this. And what I can do is say, alright, this time instead of selecting by face my material ID, I want to select all my vertexes kind of within there. And what I think I actually want to do is probably add an edit poly just on top of that to clear out my selection, then go up into my volume select, and then what I'll do is add a noise modifier to this, and we'll say like well, we're in the Y and the X, so we'll see the X like maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, like 6 feet, 6 feet. So something like that. But you see how gnarly my kind of geometry is getting there. So what I actually need to do is clear out this stuff before the symmetry. So I want to come down here and cut this stuff out of here. And before my symmetry, so this is on the ID. Where's my original? That's my reference. That's the symmetry. Okay. So I'd have to do this, I think, to each one of these. So we'll do it to our mesh first. We'll keep the symmetry on, and we'll paste this into where the shell modifier is before my mesh smooth. So I'm going to paste this in here. So I have the shell, and then I have my edit poly and my volume select. So if I look at my volume select here, you can kind of see it there. And I'm actually going to take my volume select now and move it so that it's affecting these guys here. And then I turn on my noise, which I don't quite want it that noisy. So maybe just something like 4 feet. It probably should affect the scale of it. Something like that, 150. So if I go into my front view, you can see it's just kind of not perfectly, you know, kind of orthogonal shapes. There's a little bit of variation just kind of to this is kind of what I'm going for, trying to get out of this. But then if I go back into my mesh smooth and my symmetry, you can see everything's kind of back. And I even probably after my noise want to do an edit poly just to clear the selection, then mesh smooth and symmetry. And I'd have to go from my shell to here, actually probably even the edit poly too. I want to copy all those and apply those same things under here. Okay, so I could probably delete that edit poly off. So go into my volume select. My noise is the same, so you see that same modification kind of happening with my glass panels, infilling where it's kind of offsetting there. And then the edit poly to clear it out, and then the symmetry to kind of flip it around, just so I have something that's not, you know, perfectly kind of symmetrical. I have a little bit of variation into that surface. You know, and again, it's kind of all back to that reference surface. So if I come back here and I say, oh, you know, now my professor's complaining, oh, it just looks too thick. These guys just look too thick, these members. Once you thin it up, I can make sure that inset polygon's there, come back to settings, and say, all right, fine, we'll go, you know, 6 inches, hit accept, click off of this. You can see now I have these very thin, kind of slender shapes over here, instead of those very thick members. So, you know, maybe that's what I'm kind of going for now. And you know, it's very easy just to kind of go back and make that change to that original surface that I created those references off of. So that's basically it. That's it for just kind of working within the stack, and again, just becoming a little more familiar with 3ds Max and how to work within the edit poly and kind of manipulate some of this stuff, and you know, go back and forth, copy and paste stuff around, and do what you need to do in order to get the results that you're looking for, and not kind of kill yourself doing things over again and again. You know, if you can retain certain things within your stack and retain certain things within the geometry, to where you can go back and just kind of easily modify some parameters and have something kind of respond in somewhat of a parametric fashion, where you just crank the number a different way and get a different result. You know, that's going to save you time and just make your life a little bit easier in the end, as you're kind of working within these programs and doing this stuff. So that's it.